Welcome to the EMDC podcast, where you get to know the people, places, and possibilities behind the global EMDC community. We're glad you are watching or listening. I'm your host, Tim Cowley of Expat Media Pro and Global Creatives Collective. My co-host is the founder of EMDC, Steve Ballman. EMDC is a global community of Jesus followers who have been generally meeting together at a conference venue each year. In 2020, we rolled out an online platform for ongoing training and connecting, and with that, a big growth in serving and connecting more people into our network. Through this podcast, we aim to create community and provide encouragement by talking with communication experts who use their particular expertise to more effectively share the gospel in mainly non-Christian regions.
Episodes 11 and 12, recorded on December 4th, 2020, will focus on Ethnoarts. Ethnoarts is all about joining with community artists in working toward a better future, one of justice, peace, joy, physical safety, social continuity, and spiritual wholeness. This participatory process draws on years of experience and insights from ethnomusicology, ethnography of communication, performance studies, participatory community development, and other fields. Our guests today include Dr. Robin Harris, Chair of the Center for Excellence in World Arts at Dallas International University, who also serves as the President of the Global Ethnodoxology Network, and Matt Menger, an arts consultant with SIL, who has worked in Southeast Asia for the past 12 years. Matt has his master's degree in music and is just beginning work on a Ph.D. in World Arts at Dallas International University.
Today we're going to talk about arts, ethnoarts, some people call it, and how that can be used in your project, your people group. It gets overlooked a lot of times, but it's not overlooked at EMDC. We give it a high priority because it's really a big communication tool to be able to speak the gospel clearly in your people group and in your project. So Dr. Robin Harris is here with us with Dallas International University. And she has one of the few people in the world that's gone all the way into the doctorate level. I would say few people in the world I have in the ethnoarts. And Matt Menger also has a master's degree in art, at least, and he's in Indonesia, and Robin is in Texas. And they'll both share a little bit more about themselves, I think, as we go.
You know, it's funny because our ships have not really passed in the night, at EMDCs, because you guys are doing your thing and I'm doing my thing with all the media geeks. So I think some of my questions are going to be the kinds of questions that a lot of people would be asking if they don't know what this topic is about. And so we're gonna learn quite a bit. And I think there's going to be some cross-pollination or the ideas are going to be flying back and forth as to how we all actually interact together and why it's important. Go ahead and start us off telling us, we'll start with you, Dr. Harris. You're a little bit closer in time zone to me. Tell me about who you are, who you work for, and how you got into this role. And then we'll go to Matt after that.
Sure. Please do call me Robin. Here at the school, we don't use our titles much. Yeah. I got into this when we were living and serving in Siberia, and we were serving as consultants to a local organization that was working with the churches. And we discovered in our bicultural church work that we were doing that arts actually really mattered. And the minority group, the Saha that we were working with, really weren't they weren't using their arts in their worship. And that's when I discovered that this is a really important thing. It really affected, what we were doing there. I wasn't part of SIL at the time. I wasn't even, we were with a small agency. And it was during that time feeling really kind of not well understood. I was the only person that I knew that really cared about local arts in missions. And then I discovered kind of the SIL world. And out of that, I founded the International Council of Ethnodoxologists, which then became the Global Ethnodoxology Network. So I kind of came to this whole topic of ethnoarts through field service and just realizing how important it was. Eventually, I went on to get grad studies and stuff like that. But it was out of feeling the need on the field that I discovered this wonderful field of study, and I'm really glad I did.
How about you, Matt?
Yeah, so my story starts a little bit. My background is in classical music, so that's I did my bachelor's and master's in music. That's what I was doing with my life, enjoying playing with orchestras, kind of freelancing, taking auditions, and making a career or trying to make a career out of that. And there's a long story about how we end up getting called into ministry and feeling like this was something we wanted to get involved with. So I won't do that whole long story now, but. Yeah, after feeling like cross-cultural ministry was something we wanted to be involved in, just started looking around, and actually another person who had a big influential role in the world of ethnoarts, Dr. Brian Schrag. I remember my wife and I looking at different organizations saying we want to get involved in ministry. My wife is also a musician. She's got her bachelor's and master's in music as well, in piano. And we said, well, we've got this education. We're passionate about the arts and about music, and we want to find a way to help. But where can we do that? Who's doing this kind of thing? And at the time, this would have been 2006, 2007. There were people doing this, but not a lot. It was really, I think, kind of just getting started. And there were people out there doing interesting kinds of music ministries and things that weren't very culturally sensitive, or things like that. And I remember coming to Dallas and meeting with Brian Schrag, and my wife and I left that meeting and said, okay, this is a home for us. We felt very strongly that being able to use the education we had and doing things well, doing your homework, doing the research, getting the background knowledge so that we can truly serve communities really well with what they need was important. So we both had master's degrees, but we did at the time Graduate Institute of Applied Linguistics, now Dallas International University. We did some cross-cultural and world arts training there. And I'll actually be starting a Ph.D. at the Center for Excellence in World Arts at DIU next fall. So that's exciting for me to go get back there and get a little more education in this area. But yeah, we did our background training there in 2008 and been in Indonesia for 11 years.
Yeah, isn't that interesting, Tim, that the one came in from the field, so to say, that felt the need on the field, and the other said, I have this field of study that I've already done. How can that fit into missions? And I think it's interesting that of the two guests here, they came into it from different angles. And Robin would be able to tell you about how people have come in from all kinds of different doors into this, I'm sure, and we're not just talking about the music aspect either. We're talking about the hand arts and any kind of, physical painting arts or whatever in this overall concept of arts.
Yeah, that's good. Break this down for us. What does this look like using language that an outsider would understand? What does ethno arts involve? Who wants to give that a stab?
Robin, you go first on this one.
Oh, he's going to make me go first. Okay. Well, I love what the Global Ethnodoxology Networks kind of describes in very non-technical terms. Basically, it's engaging with God and the world through local artistic. Those local expressions can be anything from, expressions that would even be what we might call global expressions. We have the language of wider communication. We also have arts of wider communication. But the focus on ethno arts has been things that are very locally rooted, art forms that people can create in, whether that be music or drama or visual arts or dance or oral verbal arts. Ethnic cuisine is another aspect that we're beginning to look at more and more, architecture, things like that. So it's engaging with God, so that involves like worship, and engaging with the world. So that's, discipleship, it can be witness, things like that. Ethno arts really has applications to all kinds of ways that people engage with God and the world. So some things that we do in ethno arts, There's a cycle that Brian Schrog kind of codified in his book, Creating Local Arts Together. That's kind of a seven conversations that we have with communities. The first one is to meet the community and their arts. So ethno art specialists spend a lot of time talking with people about their arts and learning how even to perform those arts or learning how to understand them. Just really learning deeply what those local arts look like and how they're understood by local people. The second thing we do is we find out how those, what the local kingdom goals are. What do people want to see happen in their communities? What are their goals for a better future? And then we help them connect those goals to the local arts that they have, because arts can help them achieve a lot of their goals for a better future. And then when we've done that, we spend a lot of time analyzing arts, making sure that we understand them deeply in the way that local people do. Then we are involved in conversations with them about sparking creativity in their context. What would they do to use their arts to meet their needs, and what kind of events can they have? What kinds of creativity can they show? And then, there's always conversations about how to make those arts that they create good. So we talk about improving them in ways that are locally acceptable. And then we do a lot of celebrating and hopefully integrating those arts into what they do for the future. So celebrating and integrating is the fun part of what we do as ethno artists. So those are some things that ethno arts people do.
Wow, Matt, would you have anything to add to that?
That was pretty good, except if I go off camera for a second.
He's probably going to bring the
There's
book.
the book.
Yeah, there's the book right there.
I have the book. I just realized it was sitting right off over here. So maybe we can stick a link to it or something in a description with the podcast or something. But
fantastic.
That's the book. That's pretty much what I do. I mean, the only thing that's been really exciting for me that is, and another exciting part of Ethno Arts is being able to help communities start to do and think about more of this for themselves. And so the really exciting thing for me has been, as I've seen communities start to go through that process for themselves, and I can just kind of be along for the ride, just giving them little nudges and being a catalyst. But how can they start thinking about their arts, and then what can they start doing with that? And I really feel like the catalyst aspect is important to me. So I'll just highlight that one thing. But I think that the ability to just get something started and then see where communities go with it is really huge. And when it comes to media, because I know this is EMDC, and so there's a lot of people out there probably watching or listening to this that make things, that they're doing media and things like that. Ethno Arts fits in with that, but it's a little bit different. I think a lot of times I'm very interested in how can communities create their own media? How can we help them do that? Or if there are media creators in the EMDC world, well, how can we work more closely with communities to help that media be more suitable for the audience? Not universal, one size fits all, but something that really is tailored to exactly what they need. Potentially even, like I love with all the EMDC online trainings and things, maybe they can learn how to make their own media, make their own stuff. And the more they can do for themselves, it's more sustainable. It lasts longer. So that's the only thing I could think of to add, really. Robin, that was the definition. That you covered it. So
yeah, I think that's super important. The idea of agency and ownership, that all of these conversations that we have with communities, they are the ones making the decisions about what they define as a better future for their community, about which arts they want to use. That should not be decided by the outsiders. I mean, we're a part of the conversation, but I think agency is really important to us, that local people are making the decisions. So I totally agree, Matt. That's really important.
Yeah. And I've got a simple example, and this is a very simple example, but years ago, so in the early 90s, we were dubbing Jesus Film video, the Jesus Film in North Africa and different places in the Middle East. And they just were begging the JF studio if they could change some of the music, which was basically Western, symphony, no offense, Matt, symphony music. That was the music as they were watching certain things, and of course, the Jesus film was reluctant at first, but little by little, the arts people were able to influence them to the point that not only were they able to change out some of the background music, but they were able to add some of the local, like the ladies warbling the voice, like they do in the Arab world, the when Jesus comes riding in, or whatever, which is not in the original at all. But it's the point that says, look, this doesn't look like our film. It doesn't look like a film for us. So, and that's a very simple example. I mean, both Robin and Matt could drill down and down and down and look for better and deeper examples, but that's the kind of example that someone else just doesn't even notice, really.
Let me just give us a second. We're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsor for this episode, and we'll be right back.
Dallas International University. The variety of new programs we're now offering lead to accredited certificates and degrees, and we're flexible. You can mix and match for a custom fit to meet your needs. We have accredited undergraduate level certificates in applied linguistics and 3 graduate level certificates in Islamic studies, in scripture engagement, and in multicultural teamwork. We have an undergraduate bachelor's degree in international service. We offer 4 MAs in applied linguistics, in language and culture studies, in Abrahamic studies, and in world arts. And now we're offering something unique, a Ph.D. in world arts. Let's discover together how your passion can be grounded with solid preparation to help you make a difference. Dallas International University.
All right, and we are back from hearing from our lovely sponsors, and we're so glad that they are joining with us today as we talk about Ethnoarts. And you are joining with Dr. Robin Harris and Matt Menger. And we have been discussing what Ethnoarts is. One thing I wonder if you guys do notice is whenever you visit another culture, a church, and they bust out in some kind of a hymn that you already know from English, do you go, oh man, I can really see the colonization or how this church started? And does that make you cringe or does that make you, what does that elicit in you guys?
I go both ways, to be completely honest. Like, if I want to be a purist and say, I would love to see, like, the ideal in my mind is every culture has their own unique expressions, artistic expressions. That's music, dance, stories, drama, poetry, proverbs. There's so many things. Everybody has these unique things. And so if they're not being used for worship, they're not being used in the church, it just makes me sad not to see that. I just, that's my passion, is to really encourage people to use what they have, use their gifts. With that said, sometimes you find yourself in a multi-ethnic, an urban church, and you've got 10 different languages spoken in that church. And so there can be something really kind of beautiful, I think, when we have a song, we can sing it together in different languages. We can worship together. We can do those things together. I guess it's just not my ideal. I think if I looked at it as a spectrum of things, it's like, well, if I force you to sing in English and sing, old English, German, Dutch, whatever hymns, that's on one side. And on the far other side is everything is yours. It's your language. It's your style. Everything is completely local and completely yours. You own it. Mm-hmm. That's my ideal. And then, when we're talking about translating things, well, yeah, we can share that experience together across cultures. And there is something beautiful when the body can come together and do something together. But I don't know, Robin, you have anything to add on that? Or
Yeah. I share a lot of your feelings. For some people, mm-hmm. those hymns, especially if they've been translated well into the local language, some mm-hmm. of those old hymns have become heart music to the mm-hmm. folks in the in the Christian community. And so you never want to react negatively to something that people mm-hmm. feel like really has belonged to them for a long time. I think in those situations, what I do is, rather than integrating something that actually means a lot to them and is close to their heart, just encouraging new creativity in local mm-hmm. style. And mm-hmm. so rather than focusing on the stuff that, it's history, it happened, and that's the way it is now, we try to really mm-hmm. encourage more local creativity, and not just in music, but in all kinds of creative ways that we've been given to express our faith.
Yeah. And I want to tag back onto Robin, earlier you mentioned the word agency and who makes the decisions. Because again, like, so where the city I'm living in now was colonized 400 years ago or so. So there is a very long history of Western music here. And so that is people's heart music, if we use that term. That's it's not their only one. They have local styles too, but these church songs, they grew up singing these old hymns, some of which we don't even sing in the Western world anymore. But, they date back to somebody in Germany that wrote it back in, 17 something or other. And they're singing those, and they've been singing them since they were born. And so this has become a heart music, an important emotional and, a real musical style that means something to these people at this point. And so if I come in a negative way and say, you shouldn't be doing that or something, well, I'm not actually being that different than the original colonizers who said, you have to do this.
Right.
Then I'm coming in and saying, no, you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to be a little more hands-off about that and say, they are the ones who make these decisions. So I always want to be encouraging them to use what they have, asking good questions, helping them think through these issues. But they're the ones that have to wrestle with the theological issues of what's allowed in church and what's not. They're the ones that have to wrestle with maybe their old beliefs that might be connected to some of these artistic traditions and what's appropriate for worship. And maybe do things need to be modified or changed, or is it okay as is? It's really in their hands. I think we just, as outsiders, especially working cross-culturally, have to be careful not to come in and do a neo-colonial kind of thing, where we come in and tell them to do things a new way, and it's still the outsiders who are making the decisions.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that this is clear, that I wasn't saying that we should throw out all Western, whatever. It was just that it was very field driven from the people on the ground asked, hey, could we put some of our music in here? They didn't swap out all the music, but just the occasional, can we put that in there? Yeah. So I agree with everything you've said here.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking of context where we were in Siberia. It was this bicultural situation with the Russian, church leaders. All they knew to do was just Russian styles. And it was really the lack of the ability for people to express their faith in their, own styles. It was very clear that it was time for a change to be made. And the local Saha were just they were just like really eager to be able to make their own decisions about, how they express their faith in their arts in the church. So, in this case, Ethnoarts gave them the agency to say, oh, it's really okay for us to do this. And it really, really helped the growth of the church when that happened. It really began to transform kind of their own identity as Christians, that they could be Saha and Christian at the same time. So these identity issues are really important.
Wow. Yeah, I've got two questions. So now that everybody is connected to some internet or some way to like learn about different styles like rap, I'm thinking of my this guy in Mozambique who is doing this amazing rap stuff, and it's like, no, that's not indigenous, but yet it's become such a part of the youth culture. How do you guys encourage younger generations in these foreign cultures to adapt even foreign influences, because that's maybe a more popular style now? Is that okay? Or are you like, no, we should really stick to traditional stuff?
Agency, that's that can be a heart style for them of expression. And it's very creative. I mean, rap is it's an oral verbal art form. I mean, it's also music, but it's like amazing. The lyrics are really amazing, and it really communicates. So again, we go back to agency and the importance of local decisions. If that's the style that is going to best communicate and in which people can create, and they do, then that's perfect for their situation. And they're going to do it in locally appropriate ways, I think.
I'm often surprised that I feel like there's going to be more issues than there are with outside influence coming in. And I know this probably depends on where you are in the world and how strong the local culture is and how susceptible it is to being just taken over by, outside influences. But I've seen a lot of really encouraging things where people take new stuff that comes in and they do their own thing with it. and it becomes their own unique way of doing things. Where something that I might have, personally, I might have some concerns, and I'm like, I'd love to see, I'm just always the most passionate about the most local art forms. But again, it's not really my decision. So my role, what I see is to kind of be the one that encourages them to think through all the issues, but they need to make the decision. But if I can say, okay, well, let's make sure we're thinking biblically. What does the Bible have to say about this when it comes to contextualization kinds of issues? And let's make sure we're thinking about your culture. And then what do you guys want to do with that? What's your decision? Where do you want to go? That's not really mine to make. And you get interesting intergenerational things too with older people. I mean, we've had the worship wars in the Western Church for years,
Yeah.
and to be honest, I feel like it's a global issue. And this comes up in my context in Indonesia all the time. It's like, this is not unique to here, and it's not unique to the West. It's everywhere. Where sometimes ethnoarts, I feel like the word mediation is what's coming to mind. Is I feel like sometimes we are the mediators between globalization that's coming in. We are the mediators between maybe a dominant outside culture or a national culture that's coming in, between this local culture and the rest of the world, mediators between older generations who prefer maybe a more traditional style, which means something different in the West than it does maybe in other places in the world, versus a younger generation that wants something new and innovative and different. And you've got these outside influences coming in. But sometimes I feel like we are just the mediators to just help facilitate that conversation, help that happen, and help them think this through.
So it's really about the audience that you're trying to reach, right? Because you're going to have maybe a younger audience for a certain, a younger church or a youth group or something like that. So they've got to have their own style that's more appropriate to reach them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although you'd be surprised, you think of the younger generation as always the ones wanting to go for, the globalization and these modern genres.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Alaska and grew up around, Native teenagers. And when I was young, there was never any discussion whatsoever of using the arts, especially dancing of the different native cultures there, and it was just not even a point of discussion. Like, nobody did it and nobody even talked about it, because it was just there was these strong associations that they had with former beliefs and lifestyles. And it's really interesting now in Alaska, the conversation on that is actually being driven by the young ones, the younger people
Mm-hmm.
who are really passionate about using Native dance and Native forms of expression for their Christian faith. And it's so interesting that it was the older generation that really had the problem with those, and it's the younger generation that are really ready to go for it. So that's an intergenerational thing that is a swap from what we're normally expecting.
Mm-hmm. I think there's some identity issues, and this is my own. I'm still thinking about this, so I don't want to say something definitively because I haven't written a book about it or anything like that. But thinking about identity, and I think with globalization and a changing world, this has to do with people's language and their mother tongue or tongues, because sometimes people grow up multilingual. This has to do with their arts and so many other things. Is as people start to grow up and maybe they get to that age where they're getting married or having kids, you say, who am I? Where did I come from? What is my identity? And that has to do with identity religiously, as a Christian, but also cultural identity. And so I do think sometimes we get really encouraging, younger generations who say, where are my roots? Where did I come from? And they might interpret that differently than the older generation. It might come out looking a little bit different than the really traditional stuff that an ethnomusicologist or someone like me, might get really excited about. It might be a little different, a little new, but there's sometimes a really interesting push from the younger generations to want to understand who they are and where did they come from? What's their story? How did they get here?
It's almost a pushback against globalization.
Yeah.
It's
Mm-hmm.
that fear of being lost in the way.
Yeah. Would I be correct in saying this, that you guys are not saying to any given people group, ethnic group, generation, you must do it or it's better to do it this way, but you're just saying to them, let me help you make it possible to do it that way if you want to do it that way, because to express yourself that way, because they've been maybe told not to for so long, and maybe so part of what your job is, in effect, in a sense, honoring their culture, honoring their art forms, honoring it to the point that they will be encouraged to do it if they want to. Is that safe to say?
It's like a conversation. Sometimes getting them to explore options that they might have not thought of before. We have a workshop that we run. It's actually a grad course and an undergrad course too, but we run it often as a workshop called Arts for a Better Future. And I just like to emphasize the word conversation, because a lot of times people will just automatically go to the stuff that's more global, or that is perceived to have more respect, rather than looking at some of their older traditions. So when we encourage them to look at all of the artistic resources they have in their community, sometimes just taking that extra step to say, what about this or what about that? Oh yeah, we could do that. And so just getting them to consider a very broad spread of their arts. Sometimes can make a really big difference in that conversation. Again, back to agency, it's important not to say, oh, you should do this or you should do that, because that's bad contextual. Again, they're the ones who make the decision, but the way we help in that conversation is to get them to consider maybe some broader options, some older options that they haven't thought of.
That's all the time we have for today's opening discussion about Ethnoarts with Dr. Robin Harris and Matt Menger. We will pick back up where we left off in episode 12. Thanks for tuning in to the EMDC podcast. Feel free to share it in public forums with those you think will find interest in our topics. If you have any comments, do reach out by emailing podcast@emdc.live. Head over to emdc.info to learn about our upcoming online trainings, read our blog, find resources, or learn about our physical conferences. Original theme music is created by our very own Schwartz Gray Band.